Welcome to Notes from the North with Kyle and Sam.
Welcome back to Notes from the North. Kyle and Sam here, and today will be a little bit of a chance for us to talk about the offseason, kind of switching to that offseason mode for the Vikings. And again, lots to happen here, but kind of just thought it'd be a neat chance to look at where things sit, both from cap space, both from a draft pick standpoint, and also maybe just gives us a little bit of a chance, especially with not that they have a clean slate really, but there is right now nothing's happened. So we get a chance to really think about and see where this team may go. And so that's what we're going to do today is talk about a few of those factors as we think about where the Vikings are going here.
Yeah, I mean that's basically it, right? But shoehorning the caveat in there that like this is a moving target, right? So it's like we could say with accuracy, this is where the Vikings stand with their picks, with their salary cap space, with whatever it is, this many players on their contract, and things happen, things change, right? And they inevitably will change, almost as certain as anything is certain. So this is kind of where we stand as of we're recording on Friday. I think this comes up Monday. And so even over the weekend, it could change a bit. But this is kind of a good kind of general overview, we hope, of kind of where they find themselves in terms of their resources and assets.
Yeah. So maybe let's start with the draft. Again, we got a few weeks or a few months really to go
Yep.
until we get there. But we have a sense of where the Vikings are at. And again, if you
Yeah.
actually, this information you can find in different places, but the best place to find it is over at purpleptsd.com.
Yeah. Hey, there you go.
Kyle has written a piece, The Vikings Draft Pick War Chest, a 3-year outlook. So not
Yeah.
only do you get 2024, but you get 2025 and 2026,
Yes.
all for the same price.
All for all for the same click. Yep.
So total number of picks the Vikings have is 9, and
Yeah.
certainly there can be some encouragement there because it's greater than 7, which
Yeah.
is
Right.
traditionally what you have if you don't trade anyone. So glass half full, you might look at it like that. You got 9 picks, and you've got pick number 11, which is a great opportunity to pick a real star in
Hmm.
this. If you're going to be critical or look at a little bit glass half empty, uh, the bulk of the picks come later in the draft. You get
Yeah, that's right.
maybe just for people that just as a recap, they've got their own first, their own second, the Vikings own fourth, and Detroit's fourth, and then rounds 5 to 7, they don't have any of their own picks, but they've got 2/5, both Kansas City and Cleveland's. They've got in the sixth, they've got Carolina, which is via Jacksonville, and New England sixth, and then they've got Arizona seventh. Um,
Yeah.
so maybe just initial thoughts and assessments as to what the Vikings have here with all these picks.
So one fun fact, and I'll have to double check this to make sure it's right. I believe the only so Quasido Fomensa has made 16 picks. He made 10 selections in 2022, and that has not aged particularly well. And then he's made 6 selections in 2023, and that has done quite a bit better. Um, I believe the only selection from like Minnesota's organic original slot was for Jordan Addison, 23rd overall. I believe every other pick, the other 15 selections, uh, resulted in trade. They were originally owned by another team, right? Um, so expect this trend to more or less continue, right? But it is exciting to look at it and say they own the 11th pick and they own the 42nd pick, right? And so those are two obviously very valuable selections. There's going to be potential to pick almost guaranteed. There's going to be an all-pro level player at 11th overall, right? It's identifying who that guy is, bringing him into your program, and developing him properly, right? Almost guaranteed there's going to be an absolute stud there. Very good chance at 42nd there's going to be an absolute stud there, right? Maybe not an all pro. I don't know. As you go down, it becomes less and less likely that you find that guy. But but there's going to be a stud, a very, very, very good football player. Can you identify who he is and then bring him to your team and allow him to shine, right? So that kind of bare bone fact is exciting. And if you look at the history of like the 11th pick over the past 10 to 20 years, like there's been some like phenomenal, tremendous, like JJ Watt, Marshawn Lattimore, down the line, like tremendous, tremendous players who could really, really supercharge your team. Obviously, everybody's thinking 11th, you're thinking QB. I think Justin Fields, can you double check that, Sam? I think he might have been chosen 11th in
It's either 11 or
2021.
12.
Yeah, like kind of he's right within that range. Um, you can choose a great quarterback at 11th, right? Or alternatively, you could leverage that 11th pick, toss in some of your 9. And the whole point of doing the 3-year outlook for the draft picks, 2025, 2026, I mean, these are the resources that Kwesi will draw on if he wants to jump into top 5, right? Yet, yes, he'll kind of plunder from his picks in 2024. That's going to be part of it, but it'll almost certainly involve 2025, maybe 2026, depending on how high you go. The whole point of the 3-year outlook is that an NFL GM is not only concerned about just the picks he has right now. As important as those are the priority right now for sure. But if trading is part of the business plan, and in a pair of drafts, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has made 9 trades in 2 drafts, right? So expect more, right? Is what I'm trying to say. This is what he has. So go ahead and look at 2025 and 2026 as well if you're interested. And then that kind of gives you a sense of what kind of firepower stands behind the GM. And if you have that dude slide, let's say, to 5th, right? The Chargers at 5 look like a great trade partner. I know everyone's thinking this way, just because they already have their QB of the future in Justin Herbert, right? So if one of the QBs, so you got Drake May, Caleb Williams, they're almost assuredly gone in the first 3 picks. Jaden Daniels looks like the next guy. And so if teams determine that he is the next guy and a potentially a long-term QB1 and he slides to 5, the Chargers, I assume, are going to be a very, very, very popular team. And I can only assume that many teams are already laying the groundwork for what that move up the board could look like, right? And the Vikings perhaps being one of them. And so just kind of keep this all in the back of your mind, this kind of like, they probably want a future guy. This is a new GM, new head coach. I know Dustin Baker talks about this a lot in Vikings territory. Generally speaking, like a new regime, they like building around their dude. Like they like drafting a high guy and kind of putting their careers in a sense on this person. And it's like, and that honestly makes a lot of sense, right? Like even if you bring Cousins back for 2-3 years, on the one hand, that's a really long time in the NFL. On the other hand, it's really not that long, right? So I just wouldn't be shocked if they do both, right? I think we've discussed before. And then you just kind of look at these kind of pivot points in the draft of where realistically, where could the Vikings go, to get their man. There's going to be a real small chance they could get one of those top 3 picks just because Chicago probably not that interested in doing business with you, but we've seen them trade with both Detroit and Green Bay in the draft, so we'll see. But they're probably not that interested given that they're going to be giving you potentially a franchise quarterback. And then you have New England and Washington, both of whom are in search of a franchise quarterback. So getting into the top 3 seems very unlikely. Arizona at 4, Los Angeles Chargers at 5. That's where it feels possible. If that's kind of your thing. Or alternatively, I wrote a piece of Purple PTSD about this, some sort of headline saying like the quarterback you absolutely have to avoid the first round is the one who's not worthy of the draft slot. Just don't reach just because the quarterback is so important. If you can get JJ Watt at 11, freaking get JJ Watt at 11. I mean, if the franchise QB is there and you really believe he's your guy, then great. Like the quarterback is always the most important. But if he's not, and if you see an all-pro pass rusher potentially, right? If you see that level of player, then dude, just get that player and swing back around to quarterback next year, or whatever the case may be, right? Like, figure it out. Don't draft a bust. Don't force it just because QB is important. Would be kind of a major takeaway from some of the Vikings' past decisions potentially at quarterback and with whom they've selected.
Yeah. No, again, like I think you could look at it and say, well, certainly it'd be nice to avoid the bust, and if you can do that, you do that. But like, I think
Yep.
you can look back, and sometimes there are teams that end up looking really smart and proving everyone wrong. Uh,
Yep.
but there is a lot of people that put a lot of assessment into these guys. Uh, and there are times when, as you said, people reach because of they're looking for a position, and especially when you pick number 11. Um, Again, we can talk about the whole team needs versus best player available and go through that debate.
Yep.
Um, get the pick right, is really what we're saying. Is really just
100%.
at the end of the day what you want. And um, let me ask this, because I think as you're talking, maybe just as we wrap up the draft talk,
Hmm.
uh, there's a lot of talk about moving up in the draft. I think there's also
Yep.
the opportunity and likelihood that they stay where they are. Um,
Yep.
is there any way that it makes sense for them to move down? And again, it's a
Yeah.
simple question,
Yeah.
because like certainly it depends on how the draft board comes out, but like there's always felt like there's less of an appetite for that, and especially when you pick number 11, it feels like that's
Yep.
less so as well.
Okay. So if I'm not mistaken, and let me pull up the Vikings archive here on Full PTSD and go to the trade tracker. Um, so back in the day, back in 2022, the Vikings owned the 12th pick and the 46th pick. 12 and 46. They now own 11 and 42. Not identical, but kind of similar, right? The Vikings took 12 and 46, traded it away to the Detroit Lions for 32, 34, and 66, I believe, right? And 34th ended up getting swapped with the Green Bay Packers, and so on and so forth. And then one of those picks from the Packers ended up getting traded again to Indianapolis. And so there's various kind of steps in this. Um, but that trade ended up going extraordinarily poorly. Things could still reverse and still end up being positive, because we're still dealing with young football players who could keep developing and in reality are very talented. Um, but as of right now, that decision looks stunningly bad. And in the moment, a lot of people were saying, holy crap, that decision was stunningly bad. How do you drop 20 slots in the first round and not pick up a future first? How do you not pick Kyle Hamilton, who's an absolute friggin' stud? Um, Now, 11 and 42, you don't have to package those, and nor do you have to drop 20 slots in the first rounds, right? You don't have to do something so dramatic. You can go from 11 to 14 and hopefully pick up an extra mid-round pick in the process, right? Or whatever the case may be, right? And if that's the case, then so be it. I think a lot of Vikings fans would be able to stomach that. Like, yeah, so be it. That's fine. Especially if, you know what I mean? Like, especially if that quarterback who you're so confident in isn't there. He just got scooped up, wherever he got scooped up, eighth overall, right? And then you're thinking, frick, okay, so maybe you drop back, and that's fine. He's Quasey's the value GM. He likes gaining more assets, i.e., draft picks, right? And so it's possible, but it's there could very plausibly be very negative feelings amongst Vikings fans if there's a bit of a repeat, in a sense, of a very dramatic drop down.
Yeah.
Because that has happened not too long ago, and it has not done Minnesota any favors.
No, no, certainly one of the those big first moves that Quasey did,
Yep.
and so far, again, it's not impossible that things could
Yep.
change, but so far, not been encouraging. Uh,
Yeah, that's right.
so we'll say
Yep.
that. Let's switch over. So we got the draft, and then again, now we're also talking about, and there's lots of conversation about
Yep.
what this team does, and because we are in a cap world, there is a salary
Yep.
cap to navigate. Uh, and right now, if you go to over the cap, the Vikings are projected right now with $26.3 million
Hmm.
of cap space.
Yep.
But I think everyone will say, and we acknowledge, this is an incomplete picture for a few different reasons. And even the Vikings certainly have some ability to change that number just with guys in house and even guys that are on contracts. We've mentioned Justin Jefferson before. To change some of these numbers. You've also got Kirk Cousins right now as the leading cap hit at 28.5, but yet is not actually signed to a contract to play for this team. Just kind of the way that the contract's set up. So maybe just touch on that. Especially, I think it certainly is interesting at the top of the chart, kind of some of these players and where they're at. But as you assess where the Vikings are in terms of cap space, what are some important factors you're considering?
Okay, so Sam's caution is wise. Sam is usually wise. 26.3 million is what OTC currently says. OTC is not gospel. It's not the same thing as the NFL official number, but OTC tends to be a pretty good authority on cap space, and they do pretty good work. So, and I'll write about this over the weekends. Consider two moves that seem very obvious and not really that controversial. Assume, let's just a lot of Vikings fans don't want this to happen, and that makes sense because he's still an excellent player. Assume though that Harrison Smith gets cut. Okay, that would free up almost 11.4 million. Okay, assume then that Justin Jefferson gets extended. That's the one that really should have no controversy, right? This whole trade Justin Jefferson stuff is nonsense. Extending Justin Jefferson would free up almost 14.9 million. If you take just a Harrison Smith cut, which seems like an option at least, and then a Justin Jefferson extension, which seems like most people in Minnesota, that's their dream. Take those two numbers together, and you've just almost perfectly doubled Minnesota's cap space. You've almost got basically 26 million from those two moves. 26 million you currently have. You smush them together, and you basically got $52 million. Right? That's before potentially restructuring Brian O'Neill's deal. You know what I mean? And saving almost 9 million. That's an option. That's before extending Harrison Smith, right? Sorry, Harrison Smith, excuse me. Harrison Phillips, the other Harrison. Right.
Yeah.
Sorry. My bad, people. Right. You could potentially extend him there. You could save some money there, upwards of 4.3 million. You could do the same with Byron Murphy. You could extend him as well. He's going into the final year of his deal and save 6.38 million. Right. And so that's not even. So yes, there are cut options, and that is one way of kind of liberating cap space. You can cut people. Okay. Harrison Smith is a cut candidate. Dean Lowry is a cut candidate. The Vikings will be considering these options. There are also extension candidates. Byron Murphy and Harrison Smith both seem likely to at least be approached about an extension. Same thing for Justin Jefferson, right? Kirk Cousins, that 28.5 million that we're seeing, that is as a result of his signing bonus, prorated signing bonus, all kind of accelerating into 2024, right? So if you actually click into his contract, you can see that he's got 10.25 stretched out between 2024 and 2025, and then 4 million and 4 million stretched out between 2026 and 2027, right? So a signing bonus, the NFL says it has to hit the cap sometime. And if the player is still actively on his contract, you can spread it out over that deal, kind of lessen the year-to-year cap hit. And a lot of teams do this very effectively to kind of give themselves breathing room. However, if you eliminate that contract, right, if he gets to the end, like this situation with the void years, where if you cut him, that signing bonus, which was spread out before, it all kind of shrinks up into that 1 year and has to take the cap space from that year where you end the contract, right? It has to get, factored into the accounting somehow, right? Some people might still find that confusing. Point being that, you could extend Cousins and restretch out that signing bonus, right? And do so hopefully with some some more cap flexibility for your team, right? So the Vikings really have quite a few options to kind of jack that number up, like really get that much higher, right? And so, and even with just really obvious moves like extending Justin Jefferson, right, or potentially cutting your soon-to-be 35-year-olds safety who is going to make more than $19 million or account for more than $19 million, right? So again, not that you necessarily want that to happen. Not even necessarily you should do that. It's maybe you should just approach them with a pay cut or some sort of rework deal to keep them around because the secondary is so unbelievably young. Keeping a Harrison Smith makes a lot of sense, right? Having a Gandalf in there makes a lot of sense. But there's options there, a lot of options there, in fact. And within those options, you also have a GM who, in this end of season press conference, said this is going to be a big offseason, and he knows it. And then you also have a head coach who, while basically saying that Brian Flores is coming back, said, we just can't wait to keep upgrading the personnel and to give him more talent, right? And so you have both the GM and the head coach kind of both saying, like, we're going to do stuff here, right? And so you can see the money, you can see the roster needs, right? And yes, some of that talent is going to come via the draft, but some of the talent's going to come via free agency as well. And one of the ways that GMs offset large deals for your free agents, for your internal talent, is by drafting a lot of guys because they have cost controlled deals and you get good value a lot of times on those deals. So having a lot of draft picks kind of allows you to go big game hunting in free agency, right? Because you're kind of doing this where you may have one guy, maybe like a disproportionate amount of the cap, but you have these other guys here who are contributing in meaningful ways, hopefully, if you nail your draft picks, right? And they're making this kind of like artificially low amount, right? And so you kind of balance it this way. And so you can kind of see how this might all kind of coalesce. The Vikings are at least hoping, and their fans are hoping, that's all going to kind of coalesce into what is a very dynamic roster for 2024. And it will have to be a very dynamic roster given some of the success you're seeing within the NFC North, right? So a lot of potential. I mean, it comes down to good decisions, right? And making wise choices, developing the talent you have, players obviously taking ownership of things and pushing themselves, working hard, all that stuff. So basically, like, again, all those things kind of wrapped together, and we'll see. But there's a lot of potential. This isn't like past off seasons where you're saying, "Holy crap, how are they going to even, get back to even par?" You know what I mean? Let alone sign guys. Like, they are already in a pretty okay spot, and they have some very obvious moves to get from okay to like we can throw money around kind of level.
For sure. Yeah. No, if you look at, again, incomplete picture right now, and every team, you have to go team by team in terms of really figuring out their unique situations. But strictly from a projection standpoint at this point, the Vikings are in the top half of the league in terms of just where over the cap has them in terms of cap space. And again, people can, you could be a little bit doom and gloom, but at least you're not the Saints.
Yeah.
Who are projected right now to be $82 million over the cap, which is
Stunning.
Just something special.
Stunning.
Yeah. Good. Well, maybe we'll wrap up there. Unless you have one thing, I guess I don't want to cut you off. I don't know if there's one thing you're particularly have an eye out for, or want to make some kind of bold prediction, or one noteworthy piece that you're thinking about in the off season. A whole bunch of different questions there.
Yeah, right. Well, we kind of talked this a little before coming on. I'll say, so 2022 is signs Darius Smith. You're trying to get a running mate you're trying to get a vice president to President Hunter, right? So they signed Darius Smith. That was kind of good. He played quite well, in fact, but then he demanded the trade. You then fast forward a year, and then they signed Marcus Davenport, who makes some sense in that he's so young and so talented, and that didn't work out. And so now here you're going back into free agency, more money than normal. You have guys like Brian Burns, Josh Allen, and so on available. And of course, Hunter himself is going to be a free agent if there's not a new deal. So you just kind of see, will they go back again to this familiar pattern of trying to add another pass rusher? Any team that's really serious about competing, this is too bold of a statement, but you really should have two at least two, ideally more. It's like having a strong center in hockey, right? Like, you really, I mean, it's great to have one. That's great. Don't lose that guy. But it'd be amazing to have that second, top six center, right? And it's the same thing with pass rushers, right? Like, having a pair It's so vital. And so I've got a keen eye on kind of what Kwesi does in that,
Yeah.
kind of following that pattern through.
Yeah. Yeah. No, knowing you, I know like certainly if they hit in the quarterback position, that would be encouraging. But if they're not taking a quarterback, I feel like
Take a
pass
pass
rusher
rusher.
for you
Take
is
a pass.
that'd
I
be
would build this team the way that Mike Zimmer tried to build. He was a bit more corner heavy. I would be a bit more pass rusher heavy, but it'd be defense first. Left up to me. And thank God it isn't.
no, but that would be an early Christmas birthday present. It would make
Yeah,
you
that's right. Yeah.
it just is. I know it's been something you push for. Just as you watch this team and think about this team, to have this, and you look at the teams that are in the playoffs right now. You've mentioned before San Francisco. That is, it certainly changes the ability for your defense to do stuff, especially if you think about
Yeah.
having Brian Flores again,
Yeah.
and
Seriously.
having some dudes that can get after the quarterback. Be a lot of fun
Yeah.
to watch. So good. We'll
Yeah.
wrap up there. Thanks everyone for listening. Hope people are enjoying playoff football. We'll be back following week. And yeah, take care everyone, and we'll be back soon. Thanks. Bye.